City are battling for a Champions League spot, and Manchester United are battling in mid-table against no one in particular, given that they're 13th, they can't really move. Lads, what's gone wrong this season for both? And I guess what really needs to happen to make this the biggest derby again in the Premier League?
Well, Rob can speak first for United because obviously their situation is probably much worse than City's. But I guess from a City perspective, what's gone wrong at City? Well, it's kind of hard to pinpoint what the actual real problem is. There's a lot of issues, the injuries, certainly Rodri, that, Ballon d'Or winner missing virtually all the season with a cruciate ligament injury. They've had some pretty poor recruitment over the last 2 or 3 windows. They've not really pushed as hard as they should have done. Then off the pitch, there's been the uncertainty over Pep Guardiola's contract, which he resolved in November. And the big question is the 115 charges and how that will play out in the weeks and months ahead and what it'll mean for City. So all this is kind of combined together. But on the pitch, it's been down to injuries and poor recruitment and just a group of players, Bernardo Silva, Kevin De Bruyne, Ilkay Gundogan, John Stones, Kyle Walker, who've just got old at the same time and are beginning to fade at the same time. So I just think City have taken their eye off the ball, and it's happened this season when other clubs have, picked it up, really. So I think from a City perspective, that's why they're in the mess they're in. And I'm going to throw to Rob in a minute, but obviously I think City's problems are quite fixable if they avoid a massive penalty with the under 15 charges. I think United's are probably more deep-seated and harder to fix.
Yeah. And you can probably, like you've just done with City there, you can probably separate United's problems into problems off the pitch and problems on the pitch. I mean, off the pitch, they're paying the price now for what has been sort of 20 years of mismanagement under the Glazer family. All those issues are kind of well documented. Everyone will know, about how United have got into this mess to the point where they're sort of struggling to meet financial fair play and profit and sustainability rules. On the pitch, it's just been traumatic, really. It goes back to the summer where Ineos kind of dithered about Erik ten Hag's future. They ended up keeping him. The season started off really slowly with more question marks around the manager. You end up sacking him in November. You bring in Ruben Amorim, who is playing an entirely different system. He comes in and the first thing he says is, there's going to be a storm coming because I'm trying to implement this new 3-4-3 system with essentially players that don't want to play it or can't play it. And he's been exactly right. And you've got a situation now where, you just said there that United are sort of 13th in the table and battling against no one in particular. And that's exactly right. And to put the Manchester Derby into context, the Manchester Derby really should be one of the biggest games of United's season. And it's not, because a lot of fans will be hoping to turn up to Old Trafford on Sunday to come through unscathed because they've got a bigger game, a much bigger game against Lyon in France on Thursday in the Europa League that is essentially going to decide the success or failure of their season. Everything now for United rides on the Europa League and whether they can win it and qualify for the Champions League. Really the result on Sunday against City is pretty insignificant, as hard as that is for me to say, because it just doesn't really matter. United fans will hope that they don't get battered, and obviously hope, just in terms of bragging rights, that they can pull a result out of somewhere. But if you would offer them the chance to beat City on Sunday or the chance to beat Lyon on Thursday, it's a no-brainer. The Lyon game is far bigger.
I mean, it's interesting watching this because from, obviously I predominantly cover the London clubs and for the last few years, although Arsenal have obviously gone close in the league, there's been this sense that actually the prizes are getting decided elsewhere, obviously Manchester City mainly. Is there sort of, I guess this is more for Oggy really, given you're sort of focusing on City, is there a bit of a frustration or a sort of a new sense perhaps that for the first time that, these trophies are being decided elsewhere now, and actually it's not, the Etihad is not the epicenter. They're not absolutely in the heart of it. Has it felt a bit different going up there because they kind of have been off the pace sort of uncharacteristically for such a while?
To be fair, I think because City have won so much in recent years, I think the fans are quite, I won't say they're accepting of not winning anything, but I think they've had such a good run that I think they're fairly realistic in the sense that you're going to have a dip at some point. It's just all come at the same time. But I don't think anyone at City actually either, fans or at the club, think this is a long-term thing. I don't think this isn't the sign of a terminal decline that's going to see City, struggling to get in the Champions League year after year. I think that, like I say, providing they don't get a massive penalty or deduction by the 1-15 charge, I think City are in a good place to bounce back. But you're right, it is weird. I mean, I've been covering Manchester derbies for over 25 years, and this is probably the most insignificant derby of that time. And it feels like Arsenal v Tottenham for a long time that, doesn't really matter in terms of deciding trophies. It's a big game on the national scale, and it'll catch a lot of eyeballs across the world. But, I can't remember the last time when both Manchester clubs had nothing to play for. Because, when City were, pre-Sheikh Mansour 2008, United were going for titles every year. So they had to win a derby when there was a derby, because obviously not every season there was a Manchester derby in the Premier League. They had to win the derby. Man City the same. But this really, as Rob said, doesn't matter, and it's a strange place to be. It really is. But in terms of the magnitude of this game, I think we have to say that United really let it down over the last 10, 15 years, because it used to be, certainly for about 5 years, when Ferguson was calling the noisy neighbours and it was a real kind of aggro game. It was the biggest game in English football. It was up there with Barcelona, Real Madrid. It was massive. It decided the title most years, cup finals, etc., or certainly cup semi-finals. But United have been nowhere near for the last 10, 12 years. They've been absolutely miles off the pace, and generally in the league, City have, when they've had to win, they've won the game. United have had a few upsets, but United have never really mattered. It's basically the tables have turned in Manchester, whereby in the 90s, United would absolutely wipe the floor with City and win a title. It's gone the other way. So, yeah, this game is weird in the sense that it means pretty little.
It's funny you should say that, because the derby in April 2012, literally decided that title. United went there, lost 1-0, and ultimately, everyone knows what happens with QPR, but that day was set up by City beating United in April at the Etihad. The expectation at that time was that this was going to be a thing that happened year after year, that the derby in the second half of the season would decide the title. And Mark is exactly right, that City have kind of held up their end of that bargain, and United haven't. Even in the seasons where United have finished second to City, once under Mourinho, I think, and once under Solskjaer, they were absolutely nowhere near. City were home and hosed by sort of mid-April in those seasons. It really is a sign of how far United have dropped off the face of the earth in terms of, genuine title challenges. Because this kind of, in 2012, when we were kind of setting up I was working at the Manchester Evening News at the time, and, we're, hyper-local newspaper, sort of building this up as this is going to be like Real Madrid, Barcelona. This is going to be the kind of the epicenter of football in the Premier League for years and years. And it just hasn't happened. There was that one game in 2012, and it just hasn't happened to the point we're at now, where we're sort of a week away from the derby, or the derby's on Sunday. And both sets of fans really are looking at games beyond the derby.
Yeah, I mean, back in 2012, that game, Vincent Kompany scored the headed goal, didn't it? It was, for a period of 4 or 5 years, it was the biggest club in the world, United, who probably were at the time before Real Madrid, went into kind of turbo boost, winning so many Champions Leagues. And City were the richest club in the world, the biggest and richest clubs in the world in the same city. And it's not a big city, Manchester. And it was so intense, and it was a great patch to cover, but it was crazy in the sense that, the Carlos Tevez situation, a great Man United player helped United win the Champions League, suddenly went to Man City. You had all these situations, and, City tried to sign Wayne Rooney. And they were so close to each other, but you got the sense at the time that City were pulling away. If you're in the City, you knew that City meant business. And I think for too long at United just felt, well, they might mean business, but we're Man United and we'll be all right because we're Man United. And that arrogance and that kind of misbelief, I think only now they're beginning to get over that and think that the last 10 years they've spent the time with their heads in the sand thinking that, we're Man United, we'll come back again because we're Man United. It doesn't work like that. And City, for all of the criticisms that are aimed at City, from the top down, they've got everything right in the sense that they've appointed the right people, they've invested well in the academy. Obviously there's an asterisk against City because of the question mark over the 115 charges. But when you go to City and you go to the training ground, you see the facilities, they are light years ahead of Man United. And that has happened over the last 15 years. Yes, they've had a lot of investment, but they've also made the right decisions because, as we know, United have spent a lot of money as well, and they've pretty much wasted it. City have been very strategic in what they've done. Yes, again, people question how they've done it if they've been found something wrong, but they're miles and miles apart. And I think United have still got a lot of catching up to do with City, whether they win on Sunday or not.
Well, just on that, Oggy, let me make the counter argument for this being quite an important game. In that City are fourth on 51 points, Newcastle fifth, 50 points, game in hand, Chelsea sixth, 49, Villa seventh, 48, even Brighton eighth, 47. City do need to finish this season strongly to secure that what will probably be a top five, good enough to get into the Champions League. From what you know, and I know we have to park the whole Premier League investigation and all of that. So if we just park that for a minute, how important is Champions League qualification to City? Because they spent a lot of money in January. You assume they're going to want to do so again. Does it feel as pivotal as it does for some other clubs that they actually do get into that top five and secure Champions League? Or do you think they can still rebuild and risk a season in the Europa League and continue to sort of return to the top that way?
No, I think it's massive. I think you're right. I think, being out of the Champions League, it hurts clubs more than just financially. It hurts in so many ways, in terms of the players they can attract, in terms of...
Sir Jim Ratcliffe reveals the one-man United manager he would not have hired, and claims ex-boss didn't have the personality to lead big players. Sir Jim Ratcliffe has revealed that he would not have chosen David Moyes to succeed legendary Manchester United manager Sir Alex Ferguson had he been owner 12 years ago. Back in 2013, Ferguson provided United with a farewell gift of their 20th English League title, and his 13th, before retiring after a trophy-laden 26-year reign. Moyes then took the reins, with the approval of the managerial legend, and was deemed the chosen one by many United supporters. The Scot only last 10 months in the role before being sacked by the Glazer family before the end of the 2013-14 season. The Red Devils have failed to get their hands on the Premier League trophy ever since, and 11 years are struggling in the bottom half and facing the prospect of missing out on Europe altogether. Ratcliffe and his Ineos group bought a minority stake in the club back in February 2024, nearly a decade after Moyes' dismissal, and have been criticised by fans for a series of their own decisions. While trying to turn the club around, in an interview with The Times, Ratcliffe criticised the decision to appoint Moyes, saying that it would not have happened on his watch. David Moyes was appointed as his fellow Scots successor, with Ferguson's blessing. Sir Jim Ratcliffe claimed he would not have appointed Moyes had he been in charge at the time. "Look, I like David Moyes, and I think he's a really good manager. But to go from Sir Alex Ferguson to Moyes is not where I would have gone," said Ratcliffe. Moyes stepped into the shoes of Ferguson, who's won the Premier League 13 times, who won the Champions League twice, and then you're handing over to a guy that has never managed big players and had never won anything. He's not necessarily got the personality to stand in front of them all. And I don't think Real Madrid would have made that choice as coach. If you look at coaches, a club can't always get it right, but they should have found the best chief executive in the world, and the best coach in the world, because Manchester United is the best club in the world. Instead, they got both of those decisions wrong. Moyes' time at the club was a disaster. He was sacked after 11 Premier League defeats left United 13 points off of the Champions League places, and they had also been knocked out of both domestic competitions as well as Europe. It was the start of a slippery slope for United, who had won the Premier League 13 times in 20 years before the Scot came through the door. The Glazers have been blamed by supporters for a series of financial decisions ever since, with protests seemingly taking place every season outside Old Trafford in a bid to oust the family. Ratcliffe claimed United have fallen because they have been poorly managed compared to clubs such as Real Madrid and Barcelona, who have stayed at the top in recent years. Moyes was deemed as the chosen one by fans in a nod to Ferguson's approval of the move. Moyes had a disastrous time at United and was sacked after 10 months in charge of the club. Ratcliffe has taken aim at the way Joel Wright and Avram left. Glazer ran the club before him. The 72-year-old suggested the former executive team at the club had made a complete cock-up of the football side of the club. Ratcliffe, however, spoke fondly of both Avram and Joel Glazer. "So, in my mind, we have a very professional partnership with the Glazer family," continued Ratcliffe. "But have you met them? They're really honest and straightforward, not what you expect when you read about them in the press. And they're both, Avram and Joel, passionate about Manchester United. I like them as people, to be honest. They could have given us a bloody hard time, couldn't they, after we cocked up with Dan Ashworth and Erik ten Hag? Could have, but didn't." It is the second time in a week that Ratcliffe has spoken to the press regarding mismanagement at the football club. United have made a number of controversial decisions under Ratcliffe in an attempt to cut costs as they create more financial wriggle room. United have made 250 members of staff redundant, and this week announced that 200 more jobs could be at risk as part of savage cuts aimed at bringing financial stability to the club. In a brutally frank series of interviews on Monday, the minority owner defended some of his decisions and claimed that United could have gone bust by Christmas had he not slashed costs. Ratcliffe also took part in a series of brutally honest interviews with the media on Monday. He also admitted it was a mistake to give Erik ten Hag a new contract and hire Dan Ashworth as sporting director, while outing several players that continue to cost the club huge sums of money.